Can you believe that we're almost in 2021 already? That is unreal. Now, I know that 2020 was kind of a mediocre year in terms of new MMO releases, but that does not mean that there aren't any good MMOs to play. And that is what I am here today to talk about, the top 10 MMORPGs to play currently in 2020. That you can go ahead right now, download, install, and start playing. Some of them are pay to play, some of them are buy to play, and some of them are free to play. So realistically, this list should appeal to every type of player. Now, I am going to be breaking these down a little bit further than normal and rating each aspect of the game out of 10, with the number one MMO being the MMO with the highest average rating of every game listed. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Have you ever wanted to live your very own life away from life? Well, that is in essence what Mmorpgs allows for. This is one of the most freeing MMOs that I have ever seen, providing you the option to live your virtual life in almost any way you want. Combat admittedly is incredibly unique. The easiest way of explaining how it functions is like rock, paper, scissors. You click your enemies, you cycle through whatever they're weakest against from your pool of abilities. I don't recall there being much of a story in the game. I know there is one, but since the game is incredibly open-ended, I don't think you're really going to be following much of one. I never did, honestly. Graphically, the game utilizes an incredibly unique anime aesthetic that you don't really see in MMOs anymore. And although this is going on 2 decades old now, I would still say this looks pretty damn good. The player base definitely leaves a little bit to be desired, with maybe a few thousand players logging in daily, and that is being generous. Nevertheless, those few thousand players are incredibly loyal and the community is not bad at all. Overall, I'd say this is one of the few anime MMOs out there, or MMOs in general, that you really have to try. Whenever people talk about an MMO having a good story, I can think of maybe a handful of games. Star Wars: The Old Republic is one of those games. This is the only fully sci-fi MMO in this list and is set within the, you guessed it, Star Wars universe. Honestly, I have never really been a fan of the combat in The Old Republic. It was slow, it felt incredibly clunky for when the game was released, and it just, I don't know, it felt very bland when compared to a lot of its competitors. The story, though, is absolutely incredible, providing so many different branching choices that affect the narrative, the characters you meet, recruit, and end up allying with, that you end up enemies with. This is probably the MMO with the most in-depth, well-thought-out storyline currently available. Graphically, The Old Republic doesn't look bad. It definitely looks and feels a little bit dated, sure, and that can make it a little bit difficult for new generation gamers to really acclimate to, especially with the likes of games like Black Desert out there. The player base has grown exponentially after launching on Steam, and as such, the player base is at higher numbers than it probably has been in years. Overall, I'd say this is an above average MMO, but it's definitely held down by its dated look, its combat, and a very bad business model. This is one of the 2 hub MMOs in this list. Typically, I find open world MMOs to be the superior MMO type, but this is one of those rare instances where it just ends up being so much better than the norm. Plus, I mean, you're given the freedom to take groups and groups worth of players out into large battles, which makes it quite different to all of its hub competitors. Combat in PSO2 is one of the better combat types out there. It's not the best, despite what some players will argue, but it is really damn good. Being able to swap between 3 different weapon types on the fly makes certain of that. While the story is definitely interesting, it's so disconnected from the game overall that I'm really not sure what to say about it. Like, yeah, it's a lot of fun to play through, but it almost seems like the main story is actually kind of optional. Graphically, this is one of the best looking anime MMOs out there, and the sheer levels of customization present leave you able to create something truly unique. The player base is doing exceptionally well right now, split between PC and Xbox players, and with New Genesis coming soon, you can bet that will increase further next year. Overall, PSO2 is probably one of the better MMOs out right now. Yes, it is held back a little bit by its dated everything, but that'll change next year with its mass graphical overhaul. This is probably the only type of game of its kind I'll include, or rather, this is probably the only type of game I believe in the entire genre as a whole. Being a huge Pokemon and Digimon fan, this really appealed to me and to quite a few players, considering how many copies this sold on Steam. The combat is turn-based, with your 2 Temtem and the 2 enemy Temtem taking turns attacking one another. The story is actually what pushes you through the game, unlocks new dojos, new Temtem, entirely new landmasses, and it plays plays about as well as you'd expect out of a Pokemon game, if a little bit more mature. Graphically, the game is incredibly crisp. Environment, characters, Temtem, and even abilities all look incredibly high quality. I never expected such a good looking game to come from an indie developer. The player base originally had over 40,000 players playing at any given time, but since they're still slowly pushing through early access to finish the game, they average around 1,000 players concurrently logged in, with tens of thousands likely playing periodically throughout the course of the day. Overall, Temtem is one of my favorite MMOs. I log in from time to time with Mrs. Sticks, and we're awaiting every large new patch with additional regions in Temtem with eager anticipation. I have been a fan of Soulworker ever since it was only available in South Korea and Japan. This has been a go-to anime MMO for me for a very long time. Granted, it is not going to be for everyone, what with it being a hub MMO and all, but the only MMO that is as anime as this is maybe PSO2. The combat is by far, in my opinion, the most fluid, up-to-date action combat system found in a pure anime MMO. This is one of the reasons that I enjoy playing the game as much as I do. The story is kind of average. I guess it's your typical shonen anime story with overpowered enemies and you, the savior of mankind, etc, etc. Graphically, Soulworker is one of the, if not the best looking anime MMO currently available. It looks much newer, it looks much more crisp than any other anime title out there, although the cities can admittedly be a little bit, I don't know, boring since it's all kind of just modern towns. The player base, however, is much smaller than almost any other game here, with maybe a few thousand players logging in per day. Overall, Soulworker Online will likely remain one of my favorite anime MMOs until the day it dies. It's just so much fun to play through whenever I'm bored. I have played through the Elder Scrolls Online on and off for years now. This is one of the few MMOs that are actually set within an already existing gaming franchise, and as such, the funding they have is more than almost any other game in the genre. One issue I have always had with the game, and I know a lot of people mirrored this sentiment, is the combat is really slow. While it definitely has a very deep, complex class and ability system, the combat has always just been a huge turnoff for me. The story in the game, both the main story and the zone stories, is some of the best in the genre. They built this game in a way that you become completely immersed in the zone that you're actually leveling in, something that I haven't really found in any other MMO. I know when this game launched, people were all upset that this didn't look drastically superior to Skyrim, but honestly, I have never found the graphics to be bad. I find them rather pleasant, actually. Just the character models are a little too, I don't know, like 2015-ish, if you guys know what I mean. The player base is always and likely will remain for the foreseeable future quite a bit larger than the majority of MMOs. This is, after all, in the top 5 most popular MMOs on the market. Overall, the Elder Scrolls Online is a very high quality game with an incredibly active player base, and with the content patches it regularly gets and expansions coming out every other year, this is a game that will always find new players to enjoy what it has to offer. Mrs. Sticks and I have invested hundreds of hours into both the South Korean and the Russian versions of Lost Ark and have had nothing short of a blast this entire time. Neither of us are traditionally fans of the whole top-down isometric camera angle, but Lost Ark somehow still captivated us and kept us playing. The combat is incredibly fast, very fluid, and perhaps some of the most fun I have ever had in an action game to date. You're never overwhelmed, and you have a lot of customization options over your playstyle. The story is very prevalent, it's the driving force behind every new area you go to, every new NPC you meet. It's weaved into every zone and is always a main part of everything you do. Graphically, the game is gorgeous. I've not seen an isometric game look as good as this. The environments, the characters, the abilities, this is nothing short of stunning. The player base in South Korea is not as large as it once was, but the game is pretty popular in Russia right now as well. With a North American and European release coming next year in 2021, you can bet the player base is going to soar to even greater heights. Overall, this is one of the most fun journeys that I have ever had. This is a very different type of MMO, one that I never expected to experience. We have been streaming Guild Wars 2 every Sunday now for months and have been having an absolute blast. Neither of us have ever played through Guild Wars 2 as much as we have been, so this has been an incredibly new experience for both Mrs. Sticks and I. This is not your typical MMORPG though, and a lot of things are done very differently to the norm. Combat is a hybrid between both action and tab target, with some abilities requiring a target to use and others possessing the ability to free aim. Having the option of equipping 2 different weapon types provides you a lot of freedom to fill 2 different types of roles. The story story is one of the best stories that I've come across as well. You don't find many players that claim otherwise. There might be less of it than in games like Final Fantasy XIV or the Old Republic, but quality over quantity, right? Graphically, I know the character models are beginning to look a little bit dated, but Guild Wars 2 is still a very beautiful game. One of the better looking non-Asian MMOs. The environments, the abilities, without cluttering your screen, are all very pleasant to look at. The player base, especially in light of their new End of Dragons announcement, is still pretty high. It's been on the decline for the last couple years now and is continuing to decline week after week, but it is nowhere near being anything less than populated. Overall, this is easily one of my top 3 MMORPG right now. I wouldn't have thought so about a year ago, but after playing through as thoroughly as we have been, I can say that my opinion has been changed for the better. I have been playing Final Fantasy XIV ever since the Heavensward expansion came out, and I've had an active subscription ever since. I take breaks between patches, but I always come back to the game. The reason for that is because this is one of the best quality MMOs out there right now, and being based in an already existing and incredibly successful franchise allows for crossovers, collaborations, and more with the main series that you just do not see anywhere else. I know combat has been a pretty controversial topic in Final Fantasy XIV. Some people believe that the combat is far too slow to really enjoy, but being a fan of tap target myself and playing at endgame every expansion, I can safely say that the combat is definitely not at the end of the game too slow. Early game though, yeah, totally. The story, especially with Shadowbringers, has solidified this as the greatest story in any MMO to date for me. Everyone will tell you how good Shadowbringers has been, but I have never felt as immersed in a game with its NPCs, with its world, as I have in Final Fantasy XIV. Graphically, Final Fantasy XIV is beautiful. I know it's no Black Desert, but I feel like its softer, warmer aesthetic allows for a different type of beauty. The character models, the environments themselves, even the boss fights are all incredible to look at. The player base was, at the time of Shadowbringers' release, at 1.2 million active subscribers, an all-time high for the game. This remains one of the 2 most actively played MMOs in the genre to date. Overall, Final Fantasy XIV is by far one of the deepest, most complete MMOs that I have ever played. It's a type of MMO experience that you just will not find anywhere else. World of Warcraft is the MMO that I have played more than any other in my entire life. I have had an active subscription to this game since 2008 with the release of Wrath of the Lich King. Much like Final Fantasy XIV, I continue to take breaks between patches, playing at the beginning, the middle, and the end of every expansion, as there's always a plethora of different things to do during each point in the expansion's life. The combat in WoW is the best in any tab target MMO. I don't think any game, with the exception of Arcade or Ion, comes close to being as fast as polished as WoW's is. This makes PvP even more fun, which I feel has always and will always be an important part of WoW's core gameplay. The story is both good and bad. I feel as though they've retconned quite a bit of the story and the lore in the game, but with every new expansion, the story told leading up to it and even beginning it is incredible. Those pre-expansion cinematics are some of the best things this game has actually produced. Graphically, yes, the game does look very dated until I believe you reach Pandaria or Warlords of Draenor, then things really begin to change quite drastically. By the time you hit Battle for Azeroth, the game actually looks beautiful. Character models not so much, but the environments, the dungeons, the new overhauled battlegrounds, man. The player base, especially now considering Shadowlands launches in less than 2 weeks, is the highest in the genre by leaps and bounds. There are going to be millions of players logging in to play the game over the next few months. Overall, World of Warcraft has always been an incredible MMO. Yes, they've messed up a few expansions, no company is infallible. We're just going to have to hope that Shadowlands is the Legion of the last 5 years, not the Warlords of Draenor. And these right here are arguably the best MMOs that are available right now in 2020 going into 2021. Now, 2021 might change this, or new games coming out like New World, Blue Protocol, Tower of Fantasy, and PSO2 New Genesis. But right now, as of this very moment, you will not find better MMOs than the 10 that are listed right here, in my opinion anyway, and that is essentially what this list is. My pure, raw, subjective opinion of what the best MMOs are right now. What do you guys think though? What is your list, your top 10 MMORPGs to play right now in 2020? And furthermore, what MMOs are you actually going to be playing in 2021? Let me know down in the comments below, and you might help a few different people out. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.